In the heart of a bustling city, beneath the shadows of towering skyscrapers, a scene unfolds that would ripple through the community for weeks to come. Imagine a crowded street, people bustling about, unaware that their lives are about to collide with a moment of shocking injustice. Among them, a woman, distinguished, poised, with an air of authority that comes not from her attire, but from her demeanor. This is not just any woman. She is the newly appointed police chief, though unknown to many, especially the officer about to cross her path. As the street fills with the sounds of city life, our police chief's first day on the job takes a dramatic turn. She observes her new domain, hopeful to bring change, when suddenly, a confrontational scene captures her attention. A police officer, his badge gleaming under the streetlights, stands a few feet away, arrogance clouding his judgment. Their paths intersect under the worst circumstances imaginable. The officer, unaware of the woman's true identity and driven by a misplaced sense of power, approaches her with a disdainful look. Words are exchanged, sharp, cutting, a verbal clash of wills. The tension escalates as the officer, in a blatant display of disrespect and authority, takes a final drag of his cigarette. What happens next is not just an act of aggression, but a pivotal moment that challenges the very foundations of justice in the community. He flicks the cigarette, and in a split second of poor judgment, it lands on her face, a searing pain marking a grave insult. The crowd gasps, time freezes, and the officer realizes the gravity of his mistake. The identity of his victim dawns on him. She is his superior, the new chief of police, a fact that sends a wave of panic through his spine. But the damage is done. The street that was once filled with the noise of everyday life now witnesses an eerie silence, the tension hanging heavy in the air. This incident isn't just about a physical assault, it's about what happens when power is misused, when authority forgets its duty to protect and serve. It's a story of facing systemic issues, battling internal corruption, and the relentless pursuit of justice. As our police chief stands, her face a mask of controlled fury, the officer's future hangs in the balance. What will she do? How will the community react? And what changes are looming on the horizon for a police force caught in its own web of turmoil? Stay tuned as this story unfolds, revealing the challenges and changes that come when those meant to uphold the law are the ones who break it. This is more than just a confrontation. It's a turning point that could redefine the very essence of leadership and accountability in law enforcement. As the smoldering tip of the cigarette brushed against her cheek, a momentary flare of pain was quickly overshadowed by the surge of resolve welling up inside the new police chief. Her name was Michelle Langston, a woman whose career in law enforcement was as decorated as it was challenging. Today was supposed to be a symbolic fresh start, a chance to turn over a new leaf for both her and the city's troubled police department. Yet, here she was, confronted not only with the physical pain of a burn, but with the stark reality of the culture she was brought in to reform. The officer stood frozen, his face drained of color as he realized the gravity of his error. He was a man known in the department as Officer Carl Riggs, someone whose reputation was as fiery as his temper. Riggs had served on the force for over a decade, his career marked by commendations for bravery, but also marred by several reprimands for misconduct. His instinctive reaction to authority, particularly to a figure of authority who was a black woman, had now placed his career on the line. The crowd around them had now transformed from casual bystanders into a captive audience to a drama none had anticipated when they stepped out that day. Whispers circulated, cell phones raised to capture the scene, the modern reflex to document rather than intervene. This was not just a personal affront, it was a public spectacle. In the moments that followed, Michelle, her face stoic, but her eyes burning with a controlled fire, assessed her surroundings. She understood the power of perception and the importance of handling this situation not just as a victim but as a leader. "Officer Riggs," she began, her voice steady, commanding the silence of those around her, "your actions today have not only disrespected me, but have disgraced the badge you wear and the community you serve." Her words cut through the air, sharper than any physical wound could be. She continued, "This is not just about a mistake made in a moment of poor judgment. This is about what leads a man to believe he can act with such impunity. We will be addressing this matter formally, but let this be a clear message to all who serve under my command. This behavior will not be tolerated." As Michelle spoke, Riggs stood in a paradox of emotions. Shane wrestled with defiance, the instinct to argue, to fight back, but he knew he was in no position to win. The onlookers, some nodding in approval at Michelle's handling of the situation, others filming, provided a silent chorus to the unfolding drama. The incident, though brief in its physicality, was monumental in its implications. It served as a catalyst for a deeper exploration of the systemic issues plaguing the department. Stories began to emerge, whispers of past injustices, of complaints swept under the rug, of a culture that fostered not just discrimination, but a profound disillusionment with the very institution meant to protect and serve. In the days that followed, Michelle took decisive action. Meetings were convened, not just with the upper echelons of the police department, but with community leaders, activists, and even skeptics of the system. Each meeting was a thread in the larger tapestry of reform she was determined to weave. Yet, as Michelle moved forward, the resistance grew. There were those within the force who viewed her as an outsider, a disruptor who upset the status quo, rather than a leader who could usher in a new era of integrity and justice. Rumors swirled, alliances formed, and the undercurrent of rebellion began to foment. Despite the turmoil, Michelle's resolve did not waver. Her days were long, often bleeding into nights spent poring over reports and strategies. Her vision for a reform department was clear, but the path was fraught with obstacles, both seen and unseen. As the story of the incident spread beyond the city, it sparked debates on social media, opinion pieces in newspapers, and discussions on news channels. The public's eye was now firmly fixed on Michelle's next moves, on how she would navigate the treacherous waters she found herself in. The nation watched, some with hopeful anticipation, others with cynical skepticism. Michelle knew the road ahead would be arduous. The balance between enforcing discipline and inspiring change was delicate. Each step had to be measured, each decision weighed with precision. The community's trust was fragile, and the department's morale was at a tipping point. Yet, amidst this storm, Michelle found her strength. Her focus never wavered from her mission, to build a police force that exemplified the best of justice and integrity. She was ready to dismantle the old foundations, to challenge the ingrained biases, and to hold those accountable who defied the principles she stood for. But the journey was just beginning, and the resistance she faced was a reminder of the battles yet to come. As the story continues, the tension remains high. Questions linger about how deep the roots of corruption and bias run within the department. Will Michelle's efforts to reform be enough, or will the resistance from within and outside the force prove too overwhelming? The answers remain elusive, the future uncertain, and the story of a city and its new police chief hangs in the balance, a narrative of conflict and hope still being written. As the days turned into weeks, the impact of the confrontation between Michelle and Officer Riggs echoed throughout the city's corridors of power and into its quietest neighborhoods. Michelle found herself at the center of a storm, her actions scrutinized not only by her colleagues, but also by the citizens she vowed to protect. The city was divided, with some lauding her stance against misconduct, while others perceived her as too aggressive, too uncompromising. Meanwhile, a subplot began to unfold, centered around Officer Jenna Walters, a young detective who had long been disillusioned with the old guard of the police force. Jenna, inspired by Michelle's resolve, started her own quiet investigation into the patterns of behavior that seemed ingrained within certain factions of the department. Her findings were troubling, revealing a network of officers who protected each other's misconduct under the guise of loyalty and tradition. Jenna's storyline intersected with another subplot involving Marcus, a community activist who had been advocating for police reform for years. His perspective provided a voice from outside the department, highlighting the community's growing frustration and demand for accountability. Marcus and Jenna, although operating in different spheres, found themselves united by a common goal: to see real change in the policing of their city. Their collaboration brought a new dimension to the narrative, showcasing the complexities of reform from both inside and outside the system. As Jenna gathered more evidence and Marcus rallied community support, their efforts began to gain momentum, setting the stage for significant confrontations. Amid these developments, Michelle faced internal pressures that threatened to undermine her leadership. Leaks to the media about her plans for reform, coupled with anonymous threats, hinted at the resistance she faced from within her own ranks. The tension escalated when a critical piece of reform legislation, which Michelle had been advocating for, came up for a vote in the city council. The outcome of this vote was seen as a referendum not just on the legislation, but on Michelle's leadership itself. As the council meeting approached, the air was thick with anticipation. The chambers were packed, with citizens from all walks of life and officers in uniform filling the seats. Michelle, ever composed, prepared to make one of the most crucial speeches of her career. Outside, supporters and protesters voiced their opinions loudly, a cacophony of hope and dissent mingling in the autumn air. In her speech, Michelle spoke not only about the need for policy changes, but also about the cultural shift required within the police force. She emphasized the importance of integrity, accountability, and community trust. Her words resonated with many, but the faces of some of her officers showed skepticism and unease. As the council cast their votes, the tension reached a peak. The camera panned over the faces of the council members, each one a study in contemplation and concern. Outside, the crowd waited, their chants occasionally penetrating the sullen atmosphere of the council chambers. The vote was close, a nail-biting finish that left the audience on the edge of their seats. But just as the council president was about to announce the results, an unexpected interruption occurred. A senior officer, previously a silent supporter of Michelle, stood up, asking to speak. He addressed the room with a powerful declaration of support for Michelle, tipping the scales in a dramatic fashion. The results of the vote were now a secondary climax, not resolving the overarching conflict but intensifying the narrative. The legislation passed by a narrow margin, giving Michelle a precarious victory, but also exposing the deep divisions within the police department and the community. As the episode drew to a close, the focus shifted back to Jenna and Marcus, who watched the proceedings with mixed emotions. Their journey was far from over. They knew that the passing of the legislation was just the beginning. The real work, the implementation of the reforms, and the cultural transformation of the police force lay ahead. The story left viewers with a lingering question: would Michelle's reforms bring the change that the city needed, or would the resistance from within her own ranks sabotage her efforts? The battle lines were drawn, and the stakes were higher than ever, setting the stage for further episodes of confrontation, intrigue, and the quest for justice. As the new reforms began to take shape, Michelle felt the weight of her position more than ever. The city watched closely, with each step she took scrutinized and debated. The passage of the reform legislation was a victory, but it also marked the beginning of her toughest challenge yet: implementing these changes in the face of continuing internal opposition. The tension within the police department simmered, with factions forming between those supporting Michelle's vision and those entrenched in the old ways. Officer Riggs, now a sidelined observer due to his pending disciplinary actions, became a symbol of the resistance, whispering dissent and rallying like-minded officers. His quiet mutiny was a ticking time bomb that threatened to explode at any moment. Meanwhile, Detective Jenna Walters continued her clandestine investigations, her efforts becoming ever more critical. She uncovered a trail of corruption that ran deeper than anyone had anticipated, touching even some of Michelle's supposed allies within the force. Her discoveries were explosive, capable of undermining the entire reform effort or cementing it, depending on who wielded the information. Outside the police department, Marcus and the community coalition ramped up their support for Michelle, organizing rallies and public forums to discuss the changes happening within the police force. Their actions created a broader base of support for the reforms, but also attracted more intense scrutiny from the media and political figures who questioned every move Michelle made. As the pressure mounted, a pivotal event was fast approaching: the annual police gala, a traditionally celebratory event that this year had become a battleground. The gala would be Michelle's opportunity to unite the department under her new vision, or it could turn into a disaster that would spell the end of her tenure. The night of the gala arrived, charged with an electric tension. The grand hall was filled with officers in dress uniforms, politicians, and key figures from the community, all under the watchful eyes of the media. Michelle, aware of the critical eyes upon her, prepared to give a defining speech. It was her chance to win over the doubters and solidify her leadership. Backstage, Jenna found Michelle, handing her a sealed envelope. "What you need is in here," Jenna whispered, her expression serious. "It's now or never." The envelope contained evidence of the deep-rooted corruption Jenna had uncovered, implicating several high-ranking officers who had been vocal critics of Michelle's reforms. With the envelope in hand, Michelle stepped up to the podium, the room falling silent in anticipation. Her heart pounded with the gravity of what she was about to reveal. Her speech began with a call for unity and progress, but as she continued, her tone shifted to one of resolve and revelation. As she detailed the corruption uncovered within their ranks, the room reacted with a mix of shock, anger, and in some cases, shame. The implicated officers sat stiffly, their careers hanging in the balance. Michelle's words were clear and strong, cutting through the murmur of the crowd. "We cannot be guardians of peace if our house is divided by corruption and misconduct. Tonight, that ends." Outside the gala, Marcus led a candlelight vigil, the community showing their solidarity. Their quiet support contrasted starkly with the charged atmosphere inside the hall. The gala, now transformed into a forum of accountability, was a symbol of the turning point the department faced. As Michelle concluded her speech, the tension reached its zenith. The audience was left in a stunned silence, the implications of her revelations hanging heavily in the air. The episode closed on a cliffhanger, with the camera panning over the faces of the various stakeholders, some hopeful, some betrayed, all waiting for what would come next. This build-up to the climax left viewers on the edge of their seats, eager to see how the conflicts would resolve and what the future held for Michelle and her city's troubled police department. The battle lines were drawn, the stakes higher than ever, and the path forward fraught with potential pitfalls and promise. In the aftermath of Michelle's revelations at the gala, the police department was thrown into a state of upheaval. The officers implicated by Jenna's findings were suspended pending a full investigation, creating a power vacuum that quickly needed to be addressed. This unexpected shift at the top echelons of the department rattled some, but for others, it was a long-awaited sign of genuine change. However, just as the department began to navigate this new terrain, a second plot twist emerged. Late one evening, a leak to the press exposed another layer of scandal, not within the police force, but connected to the city's administration. It was revealed that a high-ranking city official, previously a vocal supporter of Michelle's reforms, had been using his position to influence and obstruct the investigation into police misconduct for his own gain. This betrayal was not just a shock to Michelle, but also to the community at large, who had seen him as an ally in the fight for justice. The news broke as the city was still reeling from the gala's fallout, adding fuel to the fire of public distrust in local government. Michelle, feeling the sting of betrayal, knew that her response to this new crisis would be crucial not only for her leadership, but also for the stability of the entire city. Meanwhile, Detective Jenna Walters found herself unexpectedly in the spotlight. The leak had inadvertently revealed her role in uncovering the corruption within the police department, making her both a target and a hero. Jenna, who had always preferred to work behind the scenes, had to step up as a public figure to defend her findings and, by extension, the reform efforts. This exposure led to a surprising alliance. Marcus, the community activist, reached out to Jenna, proposing a collaboration to ensure that the investigation into the police and now the city official was transparent and thorough. Together, they formed a coalition of community leaders, journalists, and honest officers to keep the pressure on the city administration. As Michelle dealt with the fallout from the second scandal, the stakes were higher than ever. The tension in the city was palpable, with people demanding accountability and transparency at all levels of government. Michelle's next steps were critical, and she knew she needed to regain the public's trust while maintaining her resolve to clean up the police department. At a press conference, Michelle addressed the city, her tone resolute but calm. "The path to reform is never easy, and it is often messy," she declared. "But let me be clear. No one is above the law in this city, and we will root out corruption wherever it lies." Her words resonated with many, reaffirming her commitment to transformation at a time when public skepticism was at an all-time high. Behind the scenes, Michelle, Jenna, and Marcus worked tirelessly. They strategized late into the nights, poring over documents and evidence, preparing for potential legal battles ahead. Their work was a testament to their dedication to a cause that was much larger than themselves, a cause that was about the soul of the city. As the story moved towards its climax, the viewers were left on the edge of their seats. The alliances and betrayals, the public declarations and private meetings, all were part of a complex tapestry of a city fighting to reclaim its integrity. With every twist and turn, the anticipation of how these tangled threads would finally be resolved kept the audience hooked, eager for the climax that would hopefully bring justice and healing to a community on the brink. As the investigation deepened, the coalition led by Michelle, Jenna, and Marcus continued to peel back layers of corruption that extended beyond the police department and into various corners of the city government. Public trust was at an all-time low, but the collective determination of the community and their leaders was unyielding. The city was on the cusp of a monumental shift, and the atmosphere was charged with anticipation and hope for real change. The climax unfolded during a highly publicized trial that held the city's breath in its grip. Key witnesses, including the disgraced city official and several police officers who had been suspended, were called to testify. The evidence presented was damning, a web of bribes, threats, and cover-ups that painted a clear picture of systemic abuse and corruption. Amidst the tense courtroom scenes, Michelle took the stand, delivering a powerful testimony about her vision for a reformed and transparent police force. Her presence was commanding, her words resonant, appealing not only to the jury, but to anyone who believed in the possibility of justice and integrity. Outside the courtroom, large crowds gathered, rallying in support of the reforms and watching the proceedings on large screens, hanging on every word. As the jury retired to deliberate, the city seemed to hold its collective breath. Then, in a dramatic turn of events, the jury returned with a verdict much sooner than anticipated. Guilty on all counts for the high-ranking city official and significant sentences for several corrupt officers. The courtroom erupted in a mix of cheers and gasps, the first major victory in what had been an arduous journey towards justice. But just as the city began to celebrate what seemed like the end of a long battle, a final twist emerged that no one saw coming. A whistleblower from within the city council came forward, revealing a hidden agenda behind the push for rapid reform. This council member disclosed that certain reform measures were designed to benefit private security firms, some of which were owned by associates of the very officials pushing hardest for these changes. This revelation shocked Michelle, who had been unaware of these underlying motives. It cast a shadow over the victory, suggesting that the battle for the soul of the city was far from over. However, instead of disheartening the reformers, this new challenge galvanized them further. Michelle addressed the public in a candid speech, acknowledging the setback and renewing her commitment to true reform, not just the illusion of change. "I stand before you today, humbled and more determined than ever," Michelle declared. Reform is not just about changing laws, but about restoring faith in our institutions. "We will not be deterred by those who seek to manipulate our efforts for their own gain. We will rebuild, and we will prevail, because our cause is just, and our resolve is strong." The final scenes show the community rallying around Michelle Jenner and Marcus, ready to tackle the next phase of their journey. Their fight had become a symbol of hope and resilience, a reminder that real change requires vigilance and the courage to challenge even the most deeply entrenched systems. The story concluded on a note of cautious optimism, with the city poised on the edge of a new era. The audience was left reflecting on the complexities of reform and the ever-present need for integrity and leadership in the face of adversity. The narrative, rich with suspense and twists, provided not only a satisfying resolution, but a profound commentary on the challenges of fighting corruption and fostering true change. As the dust settled from the revelations and trials, Michelle Jenner and Marcus faced the daunting task of rebuilding the trust and structure of their city's governance and police force. The community, though shaken by the layers of deceit uncovered, was also invigorated by the promise of genuine reform and the tangible results already achieved. In the weeks following the trial, Michelle spearheaded a series of community meetings across the city. These forums were designed not just to inform the public of the changes being implemented, but also to engage them in the process. Transparency became the cornerstone of Michelle's administration. She frequently updated the city on the progress of the reforms, the challenges faced, and the steps being taken to overcome them. Jenner, who had emerged as a key figure in uncovering corruption, took on a new role within the police department. She was appointed head of a newly established internal affairs division dedicated to ensuring the integrity of the police force. Her tireless work became an inspiring story of courage and dedication to justice, serving as a powerful example for other officers. Marcus continued to be a bridge between the police and the community. His efforts to foster dialogue and understanding helped to alleviate tensions and build a foundation for mutual respect and cooperation. The community coalition he led became a vital part of the city's new advisory council on police practices, ensuring that the voices of the residents were heard and considered in policymaking. The subplot involving the corrupt city officials and their ties to private security firms led to broader legislative changes at the state level. New laws were enacted to prevent conflicts of interest in public contracts, particularly in sectors related to law enforcement and public safety. These changes marked a significant step forward in addressing systemic issues beyond the city's borders. As the story moved toward its conclusion, the focus shifted to a major community event organized by the police department and the community coalition. The event was a festival held in the heart of the city, symbolizing unity and renewal. Officers and community members came together in a day of celebration, dialogue, and mutual understanding. Children played in designated areas while parents and local officers chatted over food and music, breaking down barriers and forging new connections. Michelle Jenner and Marcus each gave speeches at the festival, reflecting on the journey they had undertaken together. They spoke about the challenges they faced, the victories they achieved, and the work still ahead. They emphasized that while significant progress had been made, the path to complete trust and reform was ongoing. The festival ended with a candlelight vigil honoring those who had suffered from the past injustices of the system. It was a powerful moment of collective healing and commitment to a better future. The image of the community and police officers standing together, each holding a candle, became a symbol of the city's resilience and hope. As the narrative concluded, the audience was left with a few key takeaways. Change, while difficult and fraught with challenges, was possible with determination, transparency, and community involvement. Leadership, both in policing and governance, had to be continually vigilant and committed to ethics and justice. Lastly, the power of a united community in driving reform and holding leaders accountable was undeniable. The story of Michelle, Jenna, and Marcus, and the city they fought to transform, ended not just as a tale of conflict and corruption, but as a beacon of hope and a guide for other cities facing similar challenges. The final scenes show the community moving forward, with children playing in safer streets, officers proudly serving their city, and leaders working diligently to uphold the values of justice and integrity. This resolution provided a satisfying closure to a complex tale, leaving the audience inspired and more knowledgeable about the complexities of societal reform. It was a story of fallibility, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of a just society, resonating with viewers far beyond the confines of the city it described.